Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome back to Brothers in the Way. I'm Brother Rold, and I'm here with
I'm
Brother Jared.
I'm Brother Jared. Hey, my friend. It's good to meet you, or it's good to see you
Yeah,
again.
good to meet you. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, good to see you again. It's been a while. We've, like Jared said before, we've had life happen a lot, and so we're glad to be back, and everyone's good, and no one's dead, which is always a good thing. But
yes,
we've certainly had some challenges, so it's good to be back.
yeah. It's always fun to wake up not dead. That's a great sign. Day's gonna get better.
Always going to get better. Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah,
so obviously we're opposite ends of the world. And so you, like Jared, you guys are getting warmer
yeah.
and we're
T-shirt
getting much
weather.
colder.
Finally hot.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're in hoodies and getting cooler, which is great. I love the cold, but uh,
Yeah,
yeah, change of seasons.
yeah. Great stuff. So today we're all about Genesis 15 through 17. So broadly,
Yeah.
this is the story of Ishmael and the covenant that God makes with Abraham. Um, and a couple other things happen in there too. So we're going to dive in. What would you say is a major theme of this section?
Yeah. Like just in my own reading and understanding, there's like, I think for me, there was two major themes. And I think this really goes from when you open the Bible from the beginning, there's these two major themes. There's God and his things, like his calling, his decisions, his stuff, and then there's us, which are participants in all of the story. So like I've always said, like we're not the main theme of the Bible. Like God is the main theme of the Bible, but we're participants in the story. And so how do those two interact? So I think these three chapters kind of have that same theme. It's like God has ordained and said this couple of things need to happen. This is going to happen. That's going to happen, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then there's the human, the our response to that, and how does that play out? Like, do we have faith or do we choose our own way? Do we, you know? And so I think for me, those are two major themes. If you just zoomed out completely, like those there's other sub themes, I guess, and we were just chatting before this. There might be some side quests that come out of this, but for me, those are the two major themes. I think. I don't know about
Yeah,
you. What do you feel? Is there any other?
yeah. So when I reread this, um, which I did just about 2 days ago, I kind of very intentionally went through it. Something really stood out to me, and I had forgotten about it until just now. Um, I normally have a couple of notes that I bring, but I didn't bring them this time. So when chapter 15 starts, God comes to Abraham, whose name is Abram still at this point, in a vision. So Abram has a vision, and God says, "Fear not, I am your shield. I am your exceedingly great reward."
Mhm.
And Abraham says, so it's starting out with some, like, you would think this is a really good thing. I'm your exceedingly great reward, but immediately there's tension. What will you give me, says Abraham? What will you give me because I continue childless and the heir of my house is this Eleazar of Damascus, which is a pretty good guy, but he's not my offspring. You said you were going to give me children, and I don't have any children. And and God says, "Don't be afraid. This person's not going to be your heir. It's not going to be like that." Uh, and he gives him this promise: go outside and look up into the heavens, and if you can count the stars, that then you'd be able to count your offspring. And so there's this amazing promise. But
Mm.
then the entire rest of this next three chapters is Isaac not showing up and Abraham just having to wait. And now I got to thinking about this. When we become Christians, um, fear not. God has sacrificed Himself for you, for the pain, for the remission of your sins. You can be forgiven. Uh, you can inherit God Himself. You're going to be adopted as children. So, like, everything you think about Jesus, that's also true of you in terms of like position, right? You're going to be God's favored child, and you're going to be loved and served by angels, and like you're going to be in this position of importance and leadership, and you're going to be on thrones with Christ in whatever the new world is. And so you hear that and you go, man, what a promise. What a promise. I am so like, that is an amazing promise. Also, a loved one of mine has cancer and I don't have any money. And God, I keep praying and asking you to show up, and it seems like you never do, right?
Mm.
And this tension we feel between like there's this amazing promise, and yet there's like real life. And so uh,
Mm.
I just want to have that tension preloaded in my mind as I'm reading through the rest of these three chapters, because um,
Yeah.
just think about, I mean, like, look at the things that Abraham does. Well, I mean, we'll talk about it, but Abraham and Sarai, they decide God needs some help because the promise isn't coming fast enough, right? And they do some stuff that messes them up. And man, don't I do that? It's like, come on, Abraham, God gave you a vision. Well, do I believe any less because I didn't hear my Christian message in a vision? I don't. I believe a lot, but yet I do exactly the same thing Abraham does. I try to help God, and that's just this is a very very extremely human response to a big promise of God. I think is what
Yeah.
we're seeing here. So that's what I'm getting from this.
Yeah, and I think kind of a running theme in that as well is if we look from Genesis 1 is there's these series of events that to us humans is impossible. But then we look at like with God, like things are totally different. He doesn't live with our limitations. He doesn't live in our little box and our limited understanding. And so it's always a case of like exactly that. There's this tension of like God said it, so like it's definitely possible. Like he's gonna make it happen. But then
Yeah,
our
definitely
brains are like,
possible,
no.
Willie. Yeah,
Yeah, but then our brain is like, no, I don't think he could do it, or I can do better. And it's that tension. Like
yeah,
you say, I think we've all, if you have been a Christian for any amount of time, you've had this moment of like, I know God said all this and I know he can do this. He breathed the world into being, like, and spoke it into being. Like, surely, yeah, it's possible. We know he can 100%.
yeah.
But then, nah, I don't know. I'm not so sure. So I think, yeah, that's definitely one of those big tensions throughout this.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think a great way to phrase that is I know God can do it. I don't know if he will.
Yeah, that's, I think, the thought process.
Hmm.
Yeah. Like, am I
Yeah,
good enough? Am I this? Am I that? I think, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And and we've had some of those conversations. When we probably another side quest, but maybe people are listening to this and going, yeah, I felt that. Like I know I've got the faith. I know God can do this, but will He? Maybe I've sinned too much. Maybe I'm just not good enough. Maybe I've I've messed up today, and now that promise is gone. And
yeah,
like this is a really good 3 chapters to read, or and beyond. But God's promises are yes and amen. He's like,
yeah,
is he bound to us and our silliness and stupidity, or is he still sovereign and does what he does because he's God? Like,
yeah. Yes, yes, exactly, exactly. There's so much meat in these three verse or chapters. There's so much here. Um, Genesis,
on that
it
note,
really is. Yeah.
sorry, man. Yeah, like I always just whenever you say something like that, I'm like, we have to mention it. Is read these things slowly and
Oh yeah.
deliberately, and don't rush through these things. And there's going to be a ton of questions. And we were just talking through one or two before this. Don't be scared of those things. Write them down. Like questions are good. The answers will come as you dig through scripture, as you go through, all like right through the New Testament. Some of these things get answered much later. So don't be like, oh no, and I'm confused. And then you get stuck and pinned down.
Mhm.
Just write it down, pray over it, ask God to reveal it as you read. As life
Yeah.
happens, these things tend to come. So just I always remind you guys, but it's
Yeah.
something I've got to remind myself as well from time to
Yeah.
time. So
Yeah. 100%. 100%. Genesis is, it's a little bit like this. Back when Marvel was making all of their, all the good movies, right? there would be movies that would come out and there'd be characters inside them that were kind of like side characters, like a name would get mentioned or something like that. Or there'd be a guy in the room that's, he happens to be on a computer and they zoom in on him for a second and maybe they show his name tag in the corner or whatever. And then in later movies, it's revealed that that's one of the bad guys. He's one of the key players. And so when you go back and you watch the movies through again, which I've done like once or twice, maybe. Some movies are really good. Um, you see those, you pick up those details, and you're like, oh man, they were foreshadowing, and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't get it the first time I saw it, but now I get it, and that's so cool. So
Yeah.
this happens with the Bible too. So there's this little tiny phrase in here. You got it. Actually, I love that you highlighted this. 15:6. Abraham believed the Lord, and he counted it to him as righteous. And you go, well, that's cool. And then you continue reading verse 7 and so on.
Yes.
But then you get to the New Testament. And there's this whole discussion around what counts as righteousness and what is faith and how does it work, and this one tiny little verse plays this giant pivotal role. And so it's so good to just read through this. You're not going to even understand all the questions. You're not even going to know which questions to ask. Read through it nice and slow, move on, read other parts of the Bible, and then come back and read it again.
Mm.
That's why it's kind of a good idea to read a little from the old, a little from the new, a couple of Psalms, a proverb or two. It's good to read like a kind of a broad spectrum of different types of literature in the Bible, because the Bible isn't just one book, right? It's 66 of them, and they're just, I know they're all sandwiched together and they're between two covers, and it kind of feels like it's one book, but it's not. And so you don't have to read it in order as it's presented. It's good to do that, reading the Bible cover to cover. It's good to do that, but you can read a little from this section, a little from that section. As long as you can kind of keep it preloaded in your mind, you can get some real gems out of this. So anyway, that's it's just great. I'm so excited. I love Genesis, one of my favorite books ever, ever, ever. Genesis and
Uh,
Exodus, just, man, right up there, A plus.
yeah. 100%. Yeah. So, we've seen these themes and God introduces all these different characters and there's huge gaps in between. And so don't get caught up in too much of the timing because it doesn't really, we've said this before, but it doesn't add to your faith. It doesn't detract from God. Like follow the story along. And so we now get introduced to two new babies and another woman that comes into the picture, which we're like, oh, who's she? How does she fit into all of this? And we'll talk about that in a bit. But the big idea is God meets with Abram and Sarai. They still haven't had their name changed.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, you guys are gonna have a baby. Well, you're gonna have a son. We're gonna make a great nation, as many of the stars. And like we just mentioned earlier, the impossibility thing must have kicked in instantly. I'm just putting myself in that picture.
Yeah,
Like, and Abraham actually, and well, Sarai actually jokes about it. Like, how's this going to be possible? I'm almost 100 years old. Like, that's not possible. God must be meaning something different, or oh, that maybe that promise has died or whatever. And
yeah,
so that's where we get Hagar, which is an
yeah,
interesting story on its own, which
yeah,
also her son might become a whole side quest as well. But just
yeah,
as,
yeah,
as a big overview, we've still got that promise that God made Abram, but now we're going to see some other parts change and
yeah,
another covenant and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
yeah. I think it's good to look at the strength of this promise, because one of your questions here: how does God initiate, and sort of what is God doing, and the tension. We've talked a little bit about that, but so God is coming in a vision, and He's saying, "Don't be afraid. I'm a very great reward." There's some argument over who's going to be the heir, and He says, "This man's not going to be your heir. I'm going to give you a son." And then Abraham just believes him, and the Lord counts it to him as righteousness. And then you get to verse 7. The Lord does something that, if you don't know any history at all, is going to sound pretty weird. But He said, I am the Lord who brought you up from Ur of the Chaldees to give you this land to possess. And then Abraham said, but Lord, how am I supposed to know that I'm going to possess it? How do I know? And then verse 19, God says, bring me a heifer and a female goat and a ram and a turtle dove and a young pigeon, and cut them in half and put one half on this side and one half on that side. And so it's almost like they're setting up this ritual. If you don't know anything about history, this might seem really confusing. Like, why does God want, like, why go kill all these innocent animals and just lay them out in the ground? And the birds are coming down to feast on the carcasses. And why would God, like, does God want all this blood? Like, is this some kind of weird blood pact that's happening? I mean, like, without the context, you can make up all kinds of things. And people have done that. But the context is, this is basically they're swearing an oath. They're swearing an oath. So what you do is you cut the animals in half, and then you'd walk between the pieces. And this is like a symbol that if I don't do what I said, you can cut me in half. Like, I'm staking my life on this promise. Like, it's immutable. Yeah. Like, I do everything in my power up to and including dying to make this thing happen. And that way I could trust what you say. And so it's something like a contract. So God actually has Abraham do this. And what I think is super interesting is, so Abraham does all this and nothing happens. Abraham is keeping the birds off, and it's been a whole day, and now the sun's going down. And verse 12, it says, a deep sleep fell on Abraham. Deep sleep. So he stayed out there until he fell asleep. And then something really interesting, dreadful and great darkness fell upon him, and a horror of great darkness. And then the Lord said to Abraham, know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in a land that's not theirs, and will be servants there, and they will be afflicted for 400 years. So that's one of those, like, keep that one in your back pocket, because that one's going to happen soon. Then I will bring judgment on the nation that they serve, and afterwards they'll come out with great possessions. As for you, you'll go to your fathers in peace, and they'll come back here in their fourth generation. And so when the sun had gone down, it was dark. Behold, a smoking fire pot, excuse me, a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch comes and passes between the pieces. So on that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, to your offspring, I give this land from the river of Egypt to the great river of Euphrates. And that's really wild. That's really wild. So on pain of death, this is going to happen. That's pretty wild.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think, if you are writing notes, that's a good thing to write down, is like, this covenant is on the pain of death, and that's how serious God is about it. But as I was reading this again, the interesting part is, and a question you could ask yourself, and we're not going to give you the answer to this, but it's something to think through, is like, who's actually doing the work in this covenant?
Yeah.
Whose life is actually at stake?
Yeah.
Is it God or is it Abram? And if you've been around a while and you know the story, like, it's a beautiful picture of grace. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to leave it cryptic, because I think you guys need to read that. I think it's a big enough deal to not skip over the story. Like, you can get, again, caught up in the gruesome and they're like, why is it there's a bigger picture in here.
Yep. Yep. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. So in spite of all this amazing stuff, we have the mess up right away. Right away. Well, I say right away. Sometimes, the Bible's like foreshortens these things. So it's like all this great stuff happened, and then Sarai gets impatient. So it could be 5 years they're waiting and nothing happens. I don't know how many years it was. You could probably calculate it, but so they get impatient, and they decide, like, well, maybe God meant that you're going to have a son. I'm going to be like a surrogate mother, basically. Like we're going to use
Mm.
a different woman. You're going to marry her. You're going to have sex with her. You're going to have conceive, and that son is going to count as my son, right? So that's what we're going to try that because God needs some
Yeah.
help. He said all this was going to
Which
happen, but I don't see it happening, and I'm really old. And
yeah, which culturally would have been okay. Like it's that was done. So like conceptually, like it's a plausible
yeah,
thing, but it's not
yeah,
what God said. So this is that exam. What you were saying earlier, that tension is right there, like that faith versus our impatience or our means.
yeah, 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 absolutely, absolutely. So, so Sarai has the servant who is an Egyptian. Her name's Hagar, and she says to Abraham, "I want you to marry Hagar, and I want you to go into her, and I want you to have children by her, so that those children like they belong to me, and that person's going to be my heir." But then that happens, and then Sarai doesn't like it. Um,
Yeah,
she says,
regrets her decision
yeah,
instantly.
regrets it. Yeah, regrets it. Um, so Hagar doesn't like it either. So in verse 16, or I'm sorry, chapter 16, verse 4, after the marriage and the deed is done, Hagar conceives, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked with contempt on Sarai. And then Sarai gets mad at Abram. "May the wrong done to me be on you. I gave my servant to your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked upon me with contempt. May the Lord judge between you and me." Um, Now, I tried to understand what might be the dynamics here. And I have to confess that I don't really get it. I think there's probably something culturally that's happened that
Mm.
I'm just oblivious to. Because as like, I don't know, with a modern mindset, I sort of read through this and it's like, well, Hagar's a slave of some kind. And so she doesn't really get a choice. So she's like Sarah's property. And, and they make her do this thing that maybe she didn't want to do. And then afterwards, she wasn't happy about it. And then Sarai says, "Look, you made my property angry, and now my property isn't very cooperative." That's kind of how I used to read this at first, but I'm not totally sure that that's what's going on. It just a raw reading of it feels like that's the exchange that happened, which would make in my mind make Sarai like very, and Abraham too makes them very like I don't know. I'm disappointed in their character. How can you have human property like that, and how can you be so capricious? I told you to do this thing, and then you actually did it. What's wrong with you?
Mm.
But I don't really think that that can be true because there's many other verses that say that Sarai is like a very very good person and she's extremely respectful and that um, she's like sort of like the archetypal uh, like excellent spouse,
Yeah.
excellent wife. And Abraham is a guy who is like willing to listen and like he's brave. He goes into combat and he risks himself and he does all these really excellent things. And so it doesn't mean that their character is perfect. I don't think it's perfect because they're doing this thing, um, which is wrong. But I think
Yeah.
it probably can't just be that it can't be the way I thought it was. But I don't know how else to think about it because I think I'm missing something culturally there. So this is one of those questions that I have. Why did Sarai get mad when the thing she asked for happened? Why would she be mad about it? Didn't you know your servant wasn't going to like that? Like, didn't you know that? I don't
Yeah,
know.
and in the same breath, like, why did Hagar get so upset? Why didn't she like it? If everything was laid out on the table and everything was explained between
Yeah,
each other, like, okay, then what went wrong? I agree. I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah. We'll have to figure the answer out someday. But that's one of those things. It's okay not to know things. It's okay. It's not gonna break the world if we can't figure something out. But yeah, it's definitely an odd thing.
Yeah,
So,
and
um,
I think we've kind of hinted at this already by this
hmm,
point now, like, because now we've got uh, Hagar, who then bears a child, which is called Ishmael. And we're like, okay, but so then what happened between Abraham and God? Like between chapter
yeah,
15 and 16, like there's a shift again. It's like Abraham
yeah,
believes God and was counted to him as righteousness. And then suddenly, oh, now what?
yeah,
So, good question to ask yourself and think through even in your
yeah,
own life is like, what happened with that trust, that initial, I have
yeah,
100% faith to like, oh, we've kind of
yeah,
touched on it a little bit, but
yeah,
what caused that? Like, what caused the disconnect? I heard
yeah.
interesting lyrics of a song this week, and it's something like, um, "We conceive and create the chaos, and then we paint it gold."
Oh,
And I was like,
wow, that's interesting.
that's exactly what we do. And this is kind of that situation. Is like, we have this great idea, but it's not quite what God said. But you know what? We've got this fantastic idea. Seems okay on the surface. Everything is because we painted gold. We make it look great. We dress it a certain way. But then, I mean, at some point that fades away and it breaks off. And then suddenly you're faced with all the chaos again.
Yeah,
And so isn't that kind of like what we tend to do is we conceive these ideas and stuff, we paint it in a certain way and we make it look fantastic, but it's only a matter
yeah,
of time when the
yeah,
inside the comes out again.
yeah. Uh, as you were talking, I was reminded of Proverbs 19:3, which I just had to go look it up. It says, "The folly of a man corrupts his way,
Mm.
and then his heart rages against the Lord." And that is really something, because uh, this is probably better as a side quest. But God did not tell Abraham and Sarah that they were going to have a son through this third person. And so them doing that was folly. And look at what's happened because of that folly. And everybody's mad. Look at all this damage that occurred in the world. Look at all this tension and war. Why doesn't God do something about it? Our hearts rage against the Lord, even though humans are the ones who set this up, right? This division between Isaac and Ishmael. So, like I said, that's probably better for a side quest. We'll dive into that probably at some point. I think it's important given the state of the world as it is right now. We kind of try to avoid politics on this show because,
Yeah,
oh, good grief, let's all have a break, right? Yeah,
yeah. But yeah, I mean, but it's worth asking those questions and
yeah,
just going like, what does that mean for us today? Like, yes, because a lot of people will go, yeah, but this is outdated. The Bible is outdated. It doesn't apply today. But oh my word, it does. When you
yeah,
dive deep into these things, and we were just briefly chatting over this, might be worth just mentioning it now because we'll do a side quest on this. But Ishmael, a lot of, and not all of them, and I'd have to do justice on this in the sense of like the facts, but a
hmm,
lot of the Arab nations find their origin, or they will claim, hey, we are related or we come from Abraham.
yeah,
And so now you have a lot of these Arab nations. I can't remember, there's certain sectors and factions of the Arab nations that believe this. So now you kind of look at this turmoil that we're in between Christian and Muslim and some of the Arab, like, where could it have originated? I don't have all the answers, but this is
hmm,
a very valid, if you just
yeah,
read that scripture as it is and apply it today, you can see why there's so much tension.
yeah,
Uh, but it's probably not played out the way we should
yeah,
have at the end of the day. But throwing it out there. So
yeah. So yeah, super interesting. Um, Are we ready to talk about what happened to Hagar?
Probably because, if we're looking at the key events, we've kind of covered like there was a covenant, God brought them, and then we're looking at, now Hagar's introduced, she has Ishmael. Now what? And then we obviously, we're going back into 17. So, yeah, if you want to
Yeah.
take it there, let's go.
Yeah. Question: Are the children of Isaac the only people that God made a covenant with? And the answer is no, it's not, because God makes a covenant with Hagar, actually.
Yeah.
Um, so, uh, so in 16, um, Sarai gets mad at Abraham for doing what she asked. Then Abraham says to Sarai, "Behold, your servant is in your power. Do to her as you please." And then Sarah dealt harshly with her, and and then Hagar flees. She runs away. So she is escaped. um,
With
and then a
Ishmael.
very interesting thing happened. The angel of the Lord, who is this sort of every time you see the angel of the Lord in your Bible in the Old Testament, you ought to circle it, because the angel of the Lord is always doing such interesting things, and it's a very mysterious character, uh, and we don't know very much about it, although there's a lot of speculation. But anyway, the angel of the Lord finds Hagar by a spring of water in the wilderness, and he says, "Hagar, where did you come from, and where are you going?" And that's almost just like what he does with Adam. Adam, where are you? Where are you? Right? Just approaching in sort of a gentle, more human like way. Where have you come from and where are you going? And she says, "I'm just running away." And the angel says, "Go back and submit, because I'm going to multiply your offspring so that they can't be numbered for multitude." So this same, like this great promise that I've given to Abraham, I'm giving it to you as well. And the Lord said, "Behold, you're pregnant, and you are going to bear a son. You're going to call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has listened to your affliction. And he'll be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everybody. Everybody's hand will be against him, and he'll dwell over against all his kinsmen." What does that mean? Stay tuned for the side quest. And so she called the name of the Lord, because remember, nobody knows God's name yet. She called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, "the God of seeing. You are the God who sees me." And she says, "I have seen him who sees me, who looks after me." And therefore, the well was called Bir Lai Haroi, and it gives it a location. It's between Kadesh and Beard. And so, if you want to go find that well, I think we kind of know where it is, and that's where Hagar met the angel of the Lord. And so that's pretty wild that happened. So, and that's how verse 16 closes. So pretty wild.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think two maybe good questions to ask ourselves here is like, I always try and make it personal. Like, what application? Like, how can I use this, or what can I glean from this for my own life now? And I think one is like, what are consequences of our decisions? So, like Abraham and Sarai made a decision that now has consequences. Like we got Hagar and we got Ishmael, and it's like completely different to what God intended initially. Like, but I always say nothing catches God by surprise. He knows all things, and that's a whole nother side quest again. But I think for our own lives is like, what consequences are there for our decisions where we're maybe going opposite to what God had said because we're impatient, because we
Mhm.
don't know if He will, or we have our own doubt. Like, what are the consequences? Another one is maybe you feel like Hagar, like insignificant, sitting in the middle of a desert. Like, I don't
Yeah,
know what's going to happen now. I was promised these things. Now these things aren't there. Like, does God even hear me? I think, Jared, you mentioned this early on. It's like, does God actually hear me? Does he see me? Does
yeah,
he even know I exist?
yeah,
And I think this highlights it. It answers it for you.
yeah, yeah. Definitely. Yeah, that's great. That personal application, really, really great. Um, yeah, I think it's fantastic. I mean, just think about it from Hagar's perspective, right? here she, I mean, she's a bond servant, so it's not like she. I don't know 100% that she's a slave. Um,
Mm.
I don't think she's a slave. I think she's a bond servant, but she basically works for Sarai. She works for Sarai in such a way that um, she's thought of as being like part of the family, but also she's like you could sell your bond servant to somebody else or something like that. So it's really something that we just don't have in our culture. But she's obedient. She did what she was told to do. She was told to marry Abraham. She was told to conceive a child. She was told all that stuff, and then she did it. And then Sarai treats her harshly because Sarai doesn't like the outcome. And so, how abandoned must she have felt? Right? I just have to run away. Like it's bad enough, you know. Maybe her life is terrible in the tents of Abraham, and she's just looking for an excuse to run away. But I don't think so. Um, I think she probably could have left anytime she wanted, but maybe she didn't want to. But now things are different. The atmosphere is terrible, and she's running away, and she must feel really, really abandoned. You know, here, I mean, Abraham is literally talking to God, and how very exciting that is. And you know, here I am tangentially attached to all this stuff. My master, my mistress, is going to have a son in her old age. Like that's a really exciting promise. I'm super into that, and yet now um, I've been rejected. The people of God, they don't like me anymore. They're acting terrible toward me. They're pushing me out. And I'm running away and I'm just sitting in the wilderness. And that's where she meets God. She meets God. God comes to her. Um,
Mm.
and she's an Egyptian. And so if you kind of look at the rest of like especially like Exodus, like the Egyptians, they're seen as the bad guys, but they're not. God loves Hagar. God loves her, and he comes to her and he asks her to do something really hard. He says, "Go back and submit because I'm going to do something really good." And Hagar is faithful and does that, but we don't get very much about her other than just that this is what's happened. Um, and so we'll see a bit later on. She's in a desperate fix again. Uh, chapter 19 maybe or something like that. It's going to be a minute, but it's interesting that how much care God has for her.
Yeah. Yeah, and then again, her response to that, because it's that same thing. It's like there's God's part, and he, I think, is so much compassion and just again, she wasn't part of that initial promise and like covenant, but like God still sees her, he still knows her, and still blesses her. So there's a definite level of compassion, but then she still needed a response. She could have stayed there. She could have just died in the wilderness, and well, we probably never would have heard of Hagar. But there's a her response to it, which is also I think beautiful.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I think that kind of takes us. You know, we had the covenant, then we have the mess up, which seems to be another theme from the whole of Genesis, and then we see God come back again into the picture with chapter 17, and now everything changes again. Now we see a
Hmm.
bit of an uptick again.
Yeah.
So So I'll add these the slide deck. You know, we might be rushing because we're kind of talking through stuff, and I might be a bit slow on skipping the slides. But we'll add this to the um,
The
in
show
the
notes.
description. So if you want to follow along on your own, you're welcome to do that.
Yeah. So chapter 17, God introduces something that this is like the first big requirement. Um, I mean, it was a pretty big requirement that Abraham leave his father and mother and journey to this land that God's going to show him. Like that was quite an act of faith. And believing God was an act of faith that you're going to have a son. And now God institutes something new called circumcision. And so this is when Abraham's 99 years old, and Sarai would be 89. I think he's exactly 10 years older than her. Um, God comes back again. So this is like the third time this has happened. God comes back and says, I am God Almighty, walk before me and be blameless, and I'm going to make you great. And Abraham falls on his face again, and God gives him a promise. My covenant is with you, and you will be the father of a multitude of nations, a multitude of nations. And I'm changing your name. You're not Abram anymore, but you will be Abraham, for I've made you the father of a multitude of nations. And I'll make you exceedingly fruitful, and I'll make you into nations, and kings will come from you. And so there are going to be kings all throughout the Old Testament, and one very special king in particular that is going to come from Abraham's descendants. And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your offspring after you for generations, for an everlasting covenant. It's never going to go away. And I will give to you and your offspring the land of your sojourning. And so, and then God says, and for your part, you're going to keep my covenant. You're going to circumcise your children. Uh, Anybody who's 8 days old is going to get circumcised. And and so Abraham agrees to this. That's a pretty big ask in an age before modern medicine, and they don't really understand what germs are or anything back then. So bacteria, things like that, totally unknown. So you're risking a lot, cutting yourself down there, right? And so that's a pretty big ask, but yet Abraham says okay, and then God starts talking about Sarai. I'm going to change her name too. You're not going to call her Sarai, but you're going to call her Sarah. And I'm going to bless her, and I'm going to make her. I will give you a son by her, and I'll bless her, and she will become nations, and peoples will come from her. And Abraham falls down and laughs to himself and says, "This is ridiculous. Is a child going to be born to a man who's 100 and Sarah who's 90? Are we really going to be able to bear a child?" And then Abraham says, I wish it could be Ishmael. Oh, that Ishmael may live before you. 17:18. And look at the heart that Abraham has toward his son. Isaac is not Abraham's son. Ishmael was there first. And Abraham loves Ishmael. And here God's talking about, like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do all this great stuff, and I'm changing your names even for the occasion, and there's the circumcision stuff. This is a big deal. And Abraham says, "Oh, don't leave Ishmael out, please. Let's not overlook Ishmael. This all sounds great. Let's do it with Ishmael, please." Um, and uh, and that's amazing fatherly heart, I think. By the way, I think I'm getting some feedback from your old, so I can hear myself. You might just want to mute when.
Okay, sounds fine my side, but I can turn it off.
I'm not sure if it's going to show up in the final or not.
Double check.
Okay. Yeah. So, so then Isaac's birth is promised. God says no. God says no. It's not gonna be Ishmael. It's gonna be Isaac. But he says, Sarah, your wife, is gonna bear a son, and you'll call his name Isaac, and I will establish my covenant with him. So it's him. All that stuff I just talked about of nations and kings and all that stuff. That's Isaac. But as for Ishmael, verse 20, I have heard you. And so the Lord is agreeing to bless Ishmael. We already know he cared for Hagar. We already know he cared for Ishmael. He's already shown up multiple times. And so this isn't a rejection. It's not a curse. And so in verse 20, I have heard you, and I have blessed him, and I will make him fruitful and multiply him greatly. And he is going to father 12 princes, and I will make him into a great nation. But I'm going to establish my covenant with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear. And when he had finished talking, God went up from Abraham. And then Abraham does the act of circumcision for him and his whole house. So we've set up a lot of stuff now. And yeah, many things are happening. But what's your feeling about the way Ishmael's been treated here?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's like we were saying, is there just before we got on here, is like a lot of people might read this and like, oh, it's a curse and he's outcast, but it's not. It doesn't say that. So I think we can come up with a whole lot of other stories and ideas, but it's not what it says. Uh, Obviously we don't know how he interpreted that down the line. Like that's not what. But the point was, like God says, I'm going to make him a great nation. I'm going to bless him. It's not a curse. It's not like you're going to be outcast. You're going to be. It's not what it says. So I think, I mean, like you said earlier, and it kind of answers your question earlier about, well, not answers it, but throws in food for thought when you talk about like the Sarai and Hagar, like why did they fall out? When Abraham and their general heart towards Ishmael was like, hey, he's our firstborn. It's like, so it does throw a little bit of questioning in there, like what was the motive about her leaving and why did there was a fallout? But I think it's really beautiful. I think it's like God's like, it reminded me, and this is why I'm going there. It reminded me of Romans 8 is like, um, God works all things together for the good of those who love him. And so in this case, Hagar does the right thing. She goes back, she submits, she does, and Abraham and them are also doing the right thing. So they're loving God. You know, and he still makes a potentially what looks like a bad situation turn into something really good. What happened down the line is a whole nother story. But right now, like this is a blessing. It's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, really, really great, really great. Um, it's amazing. In 3 verses, you get 3 different, or maybe even more than that, affirmations of this promise. Um, you get the dream, then you get the second dream at night with the smoking pot and the flaming furnace and the animals cut in half, and then you get basically God coming down again. This is going to happen in this way, and that kind of stuff. Like it's pretty amazing that God just over and over and over again reaffirms His promise. So that's pretty wild. That's pretty wild. But I love this
Yeah.
idea of unhurried faithfulness from the last slide there, because good grief, isn't that hard?
Well, it's said right from what we said in the beginning is the tension between like what God said and what when it happens. Like I know myself, I'm very impatient because I'm like, I know it, like God can do it, so just do it. Like uh, I'll briefly share when I got born again when I was 12 years old. Like I had a dream that God said you'll plant churches, and I mean I didn't at that stage even know what that meant. Like what does it even look like? I'm just got saved. I grew up in a place of not really liking going to church at all because of it was very traditional and very forced and very religious. And I was like, I don't want anything to do with that. So for the idea of to plant churches when I had no idea what that even meant, like what is that? Um, but that took 20 years before we planted our first church. And but in the meantime, like I tried everything. I was like, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna, you know, and none of it was the right timing. It ended up being like I got frustrated. But when we planted our first church, it was so natural. The doors just opened, like everything fell in place when it needed to. So there's always that tension. Like it could be 20 years, it could be 15, it could be 2 days. I don't know.
Yeah,
Like that's that tension between really just trusting God no matter how long it takes versus like, hey, what can I do instead? What can I bring to the party? Which a lot of times we make things happen, like I said, and then we paint it gold and we're like, yeah, this is great, but was it really God?
yeah,
I don't know. I don't know.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Uh, this idea that this is kind of the first time this has really happened, where God says, "I have this plan. I'm going to do this thing. Now hurry up and wait." Right? This whole hurry up and wait thing. Um, once we get into like Moses later on, this is one of those times where he sees what's being done. He wants to be the rescuer, and then God sidelines him in the Midianite wilderness for 20 years. Same thing with several other people in the Bible. Just these sort of long stretches of time. And there is probably some good wisdom in that. God, what you said in the last slide, that time reveals what's in the heart. And so there's probably some really good wisdom in that, because if you can tell somebody the promise, but if you give it to them before they're developed enough to handle it, this is like the reason, uh, like when my nephews were, or my niece and my nephew, when they're really young, and they're helping out with the dishes, like you don't ever let them dry the steak knives off. You let them dry the spoons off, right? And so, like the promise is, they're going to grow up, they're going to understand how to handle things, they're going to be able to help with housework and and do wood carving and like whatever else they want to do in life. Like that's coming, but now is not the time. And so, right now, the only thing you get to do is dry off the spoons. And so, that is something like how God's treating us too. There's this amazing, like, you're going to rule with Christ promise that comes with Christianity. But right now, you're a spoon dryer. And you go, it just feels so inconsequential. It just feels like, gosh, look at all this stuff that's happening. Look at all the stuff I could be doing. God, why don't you show up? God, why don't you make me different? And the process you're going through is the thing that's making you different. So here's the sound clip of the show. This is something that I've learned. This is something I've learned and that I believe, but I have to keep telling myself over and over. All right, so here it is. If I knew everything that God knew, and if I had all of God's power, and if I loved myself as much as God loved me, I would choose for myself all the same stuff that God has chosen for me. So all the bad things that happened in my life, all the good things that happened, the places where I lived, the people I met, the events that occurred, I would choose for myself all of that same stuff, because God has done the best. And it doesn't, God has used everything for my good. So it doesn't mean that I'm allowed to just go do anything I want, trusting that God's going to make it good. I still have to make wise decisions. But the process of my life has made me wiser and deeper and more mature and stronger faith and all that stuff. And I went through some stuff concerning my faith. I went through some stuff. So I've lost things. It's been hard, and I'm not talking about like an experience that no one else has had. This is common to humanity. If you think of the whole world as being sort of an engine that makes souls and develops them, the world seems to be doing a good job of that, because there are human beings, the more they suffer, the sweeter they become. And then there's some human beings that suffer and they become like super extra terrible bitter. And so if the world is like, if that's the purpose of the world, is to create the kinds of souls that God needs, then it's doing a fantastic job of that. And so we'll just have to remember, this life isn't the only one there is. There's something that comes after this, and so we just have to kind of keep that in mind too. But it's hard. You look around and you see suffering, and you see cancers, and you see price of everything going up, and you see wars and rumors of wars, and the earthquakes and natural disasters of every description, and disease, and people being ugly to one another. I mean, you kind of look at this and you go, man, where is God? What is he even doing right now? And this is the time when the waiting reveals what's in our heart. But I do not say that it's easy. It's hard for us just as much as it's hard for everybody else too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think just maybe then in closing, it just got me kind of thinking is like a question to ask, because like you just said, rightfully, it is hard. Like we're all going to go through these struggles. We're all going to have these questions. We're going to have the doubts, the fears, the like, will God see me? Will he do this? Is he going to whatever? But what is these three chapters, if you read them again, and as you carry on reading, like what does it say about God and the way he acts towards those who struggle to trust initially. Like, does he go like, "Oh, sorry for you, cheers," like,
Yeah.
or is he patient and kind? And yeah, there's consequences. We can't escape consequences, but he's still there. He sees where we don't see. And so it's just a question. I think, I don't know. I'm not going, I don't have an answer for that, but I know in my life is like, I've struggled a lot, but I know God's always been there.
Yeah.
For the last 30 years that I've followed him, like, you can't convince me otherwise. Even in
Yeah.
the moments where it's quiet and I've doubted and I've had fears and I've had my way where I kick down things like, I'm going to do this and it's not God's call. Like, how does God treat us when we struggle? Just
Yeah.
based, if you look at these three chapters, I think it's a, yeah, wrestle with it, or think it through. I think it should bring you quite a bit of peace and
Yeah.
knowing that God sees
Yeah.
you. We appreciate you guys. If you can like and subscribe and share this with someone who maybe needs to hear some of this stuff, who has some questions, please do that. It helps us a ton. And I hope all of this comes across. If not, we might just edit something in, or something. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode, and we're going to encourage you, keep reading the Bible, keep going through this systematically, keep asking questions, keep taking notes, and we'll see you in the next episode. Pray for us. We're praying for all of you.
Yeah.
Have a blessed weekend, and we'll see you guys soon.
See you, friends.
Cheers.